Right, let's get into the papers in the company of the Athletics Everton correspondent Patrick Boyle and podcaster William Pugh. Good morning to both of you. Paddy, I know you're Everton, but we will start with Liverpool this morning. And a disappointing season continues out of the FA Cup after a 2-1 defeat at Brighton yesterday. The Mirror going with the headline, "We're sorry," with quotes from captain on the day, Andy Robertson, who says that they have been nowhere near good enough this season. Paddy, you'd be hard-stretched to disagree with that, wouldn't you?
Right from the success they had, particularly in 2019-20, where they obviously won the Premier League. To me, it kind of feels like the end of a cycle, that particular cycle for them. You have a situation where key players that were stalwart in that side, are either coming to the ends of their careers, so players like Jordan Henderson and even James Milner. But then you have others like Fabinho, who's been so out of form this season, replaced by a youngster in Brisetic in midfield. Everywhere you look across the team, there seems to be an issue. Not completely functioning, I don't think, properly. And I think that's the issue with Klopp's system. It's that if there's one cog out of place, it leads to several others elsewhere. And now they're left reliant up front with Sadio Mane gone, left relying on a player in Gakpo, who's only just arrived, is adapting to a new environment, a new league, a new club, but is doing so, in my opinion, out of position as well. I mean, most of his best work in the World Cup recently came for Holland in that kind of wide left channel, and that's where he played for PSV. I think leading the line right now in a failing Liverpool team is probably not what he needs to kind of acclimatise and adapt to the Premier League.
I think the one thing as well, you had Klopp's system last season, everything was working perfectly. There were no flaws. Everyone knew what they were doing. The domestic cup double was obviously fantastic, and they just fell short in the Premier League and the Champions League. And all of a sudden, you take, as Paddy said there, a vital cog out in Sadio Mane, and it just shows that even at a wonderful, well-run club like Liverpool, a lack of confidence, and just when one or two things start going wrong, how quickly that can creep in, and you've got all of a sudden a perfectly well-oiled machine that is it's just not happening in all areas of the pitch, which just makes you wonder really whether or not big new transfers in this window or going forward in the summer are going to solve it. And you wonder whether perhaps Klopp's just coming to the end of a cycle as well as the team.
Well, that is the point, to pick up on a phrase that Paddy used, that there are problems everywhere that you look at the moment. William, how much work and how many new faces do you think are needed probably in the summer? There might not be too much in the next day or so, but over the course of next summer, what do Liverpool need?
Absolutely. I mean, it seems like Liverpool fans particularly have been crying out for a midfielder for some time. You've got the Jordan Henderson and Fabinho, who've been fantastic for the club for so long. Thiago in there as well. It seems midfielder initially, the loss of Sadio Mane at the time, lots of Liverpool fans felt with Diogo Jota, Luis Diaz in those attacking positions alongside Salah was enough to cope with that replacement of Mane, but I just don't think that's proved to be true. So you'd think the midfield was certainly a focus as well as those attacking positions. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of these players in that Liverpool team haven't become bad players overnight. So it's not like a drastic rebuild's required.
At the moment is midfield, and I just think you've got a situation now where, like we were saying earlier, Jordan Henderson's coming to the end of his time as kind of a top-level player. James Milner is in a similar boat, and I think Liverpool fans now have been crying out for investment in that midfield area for a number of seasons, and they haven't had it. And I think that's led to disappointment, a bit of anger at the overall transfer policy. So it's not as necessarily a happy camp in that regard. I also think that in the fullback areas, Andy Robertson in particular has looked at kind of a shade of the player he was last season and the year before. And they may well look either to promote somebody like Tsimikas or to bring in other options in the fullback positions. But I think they just need to be rejuvenated and revitalised. When I watched them this season, they've been so flat and so flawed in the way they played. The polar opposite of what you'd imagine a Jurgen Klopp side to be. And I think that it predominantly comes from the engine room. I mean, they're interested in somebody like Jude Bellingham is well documented. He's going to be wanted by everybody. But I think Liverpool need to be really careful here, because it's all well and good Bellingham wanting to move and liking the idea of going to Anfield and working under somebody like Klopp. But is he going to make the step there if they're not in top-tier European competition? Will they have the money financially to compete with some of the other big boys who are in the race? Because looking around the market now for midfield, I think Jude Bellingham's the one that everybody wants, the prized asset there, and they're going to have to make a compelling case. I think that means Champions League qualification and big money bids and salaries offered in the summer.
Let's move on to the Telegraph, shall we? Because Chelsea apparently not quite finished yet in this transfer window. £215 million already spent, but they are still in for Benfica as World Cup winner Enzo Fernandez. They've had problems in that area, haven't they, William, central midfield? Is Fernandez a key signing, someone that would really improve this Chelsea team?
Well, 22 years old, 10 Argentina caps, you mentioned, fresh off the back of a World Cup victory. He's a talented player, no doubt. The sort of money, £105 million being spoken about. You expect world beaters for those sort of fees these days. I'm not quite sure, obviously taking his World Cup win into account, whether that's the case. I don't think he's going to transform Chelsea's fortunes immediately, but it's just interesting because it wasn't so long ago with N'Golo Kante, Jorginho and Kovacic, the heartbeat of that Chelsea midfield. Lots of fans, particularly Blues fans, were arguing that was the area of least concern in their team, and that there were positions sort of everywhere else that needed a bit more immediate attention. That certainly isn't the case now. You get the sense Jorginho has become a bit of a Marmite figure at Stamford Bridge, and of course N'Golo Kante's injury record doesn't do him any favours, really. So all of a sudden, especially as they've strengthened in other areas, the Fernandez, it looks like an excellent deal, certainly one for the future as well, which has been at least 50% of Todd Boehly's strategy, or whatever strategy he seems to have had since he's been at Chelsea. I think it will be an excellent signing, but it's not going to immediately transform their fortunes overnight.
I really like Fernandez as a player. I thought he was fantastic at the World Cup and probably one of the breakthrough stars if you look back at that month or so in Qatar. For me, he profiles as pretty much an all-round midfielder, so he'll win the ball back for you, but he's also creative. He's a good passer of the ball. My concern, as I think Will's mentioned there, is over the fee. It's an awful lot of money for somebody who is 22 years of age and still making his way in the game. I think he'll add to Chelsea's options and supplement them, and I think for the future probably become a kind of a stalwart in their midfield. But here and now it does seem like a lot of money. The wider transfer policy I think is interesting, and I wonder how it will go down with Chelsea fans. So they've obviously in the past been used to going out and signing the best of the best players that can kind of come in and make the impact here and now. Under Todd Boehly, they do seem to have gone in a very different direction. It's kind of a supermarket sweep, if you will, of lots of the best brightest young talents from around the world with Mudryk and others. Fernandez adds to that stable of quality young players. But I think when you go down that route, there has to be a patience, there has to be a buy-in at all levels of the club, including from the fans, over the direction, over the fact that this is going to take time. And it's a very different Chelsea, I think, now that we're seeing moving forward under Todd Boehly than the one, obviously, under Roman Abramovich before him.
And it wasn't that long ago that Anthony Gordon was a Chelsea target back in the summer, but the newspaper, one of many, obviously confirming that Gordon is now a Newcastle player. Paddy, it was a bit of a sort of untidy, distasteful end to his time as an Everton player, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he mentioned that himself when he gave his first interview as a Newcastle player. He'd spoken about a messy week, and what he's referring to there is, as most people know, the 3 missed training sessions at Everton at the start of the week that Everton saying weren't sanctioned, certainly the last 2, basically in a bid to force that move to Newcastle. He had his eyes set on going there, wanted to make the step up from relegation strugglers, as Everton are right now, to a side in Newcastle that are fighting to break into the Champions League. A messy situation, particularly when you consider Anthony Gordon was at Everton from the age of 11. He's an academy graduate, somebody who came through the club and somebody fans associated with as kind of one of their own, the kind of the embodiment of them on the pitch. So you wouldn't have wanted to get to it here, and I get to this point, and I think it's probably not being handled in the best way by any party. What I would say is that Everton have got a great fee here for somebody like Gordon, who is at the start of his career, only has 7 goals in the Premier League under his belt, and is clearly a work in progress. And he also just feels like such a good fit for Eddie Howe's kind of new, youthful and vibrant Newcastle, with his pressing from the front, his dynamism on and off the ball. I think he'll fit well in there. For me, just a case of Everton needing the money for FFP reasons and wanting to kind of reinvest back in the squad, and Newcastle being able to gamble a bit more on kind of not an unknown quantity as such, but somebody who's going to get better over an extended period of time. These two clubs at very different stages in their development now.
It's interesting, isn't it? Talking of reinvesting, Paddy, Anthony Gordon, in fact, in the interview himself, when I said, I hope they can use the money to change the squad. But the problem is they don't have long to do it, do they? Because time is ticking away very quickly to bring in players.
Well, that's absolutely. They've spent most of the window up to now looking for budget deals and particularly loan deals. And obviously that's created problems. Had interest in Matheus Cunha, who went to Wolves, but just weren't able to get anywhere near that £50 million obligation that Wolves, €50 million that Wolves paid for him in the end. It's been the case with other players. There's been fleeting interest in Rutter, who went to Leeds, and Schade, who went to Brentford. So they've been scrambling around in that kind of market. This will free up some funds, some more funds, but they've not got long to do it. As you say, the transfer window closes in just over a day, and at the end of Tuesday, and it's now a bit of a scramble from my point of view for them to reinvest some of this money and to get the quality in that they so urgently need. Played most of the season and just haven't looked like threatening. They averaged less than 1 goal a game in the Premier League this season. And that's because they just don't have enough creativity and they don't have enough firepower up front. If they want to have any chance of surviving relegation, they're going to need to rectify those issues in the next day or so. So it's a big ask. It's a big ask, but finally some funds freed up.
It's difficult with, as Paddy's mentioned there, the second lowest scorers in the league. They've just lost their second highest scorer in Anthony Gordon. And it's easy to say, oh, get a striker in and he'll start banging the goals in, and that's the issue that needs rectifying. But there's a whole, as we've seen with Frank Lampard being sacked, the issue has run throughout the team, and it's as much about the creativity and the players in behind. There's certainly not going to be enough time to rectify that completely in this window. You'd hope if they can get 1 or 2 deals over the line, that might help. But as far as goal scoring goes, if they don't rectify that soon, it may be another summer where you're facing a completely different prospect in needing to prepare for a championship season. So it's sort of panic stations time already. But the goals issue, obviously the one the most pressing, and I'm sure those at Goodison Park will be working on those behind the scenes.
Gentlemen, great to have you with us this morning. Thank you very much indeed. And you can join us tonight, 10:30, as we preview tomorrow's back pages in the company of the chief football writer of The Mirror, John Cross, and the Independent's Miguel Delaney. Back pages tonight here on Sky Sports News.